And it was a long journey. He was in and out of remission for about 10 years. It ended up going eventually to his liver, lung, and then brain. And along that journey, we learned a lot. We learned a lot about cancer. We learned a lot about the human spirit. We learned a lot about how important the mind is, how important it is to say, I love you, which is like the simplest thing in the world. But especially now after COVID, like you never know, you might not see people again.
Yeah.
And so how valuable is that time and that conversation?
Let's link up with Krista on the Fix. She's a wellness coach with a focus on mental well-being and physical strength.
Hey there, Fix listeners. Welcome to episode 71 of the Fix podcast. I'm your host, Krista Huber, and we're keeping right along with our theme of mental health in support of Mental Health Awareness Month for this May. As you guys know, this is a topic that's very important to me. It's definitely not a topic that I would exclusively discuss in this month alone, but it's so important that anytime I have the opportunity to speak with a guest, sit down with somebody who can really dive into this in a lot of detail, I'm 100% going to take it. And I'm very excited to introduce today's conversation because it's with a woman who is a practitioner in so many senses of the word. Erica LoPresti is a nurse practitioner, and she's also somebody who's had a lot of profound life experiences that have really shaped, and you'll hear this throughout our chat, her approach as a medical professional. And I think there's so much power in being able to not only, study and put things into practice because you've worked with tons of patients and have had exposure to a lot of different diseases, illnesses, whatever it is, but also feel them on a much deeper level in your personal life. And Erica's story is really where we spend a lot of time throughout this conversation before getting into some of the science and getting into some of her suggestions and different services that are a part of her wellness practice. And I think there's a reason why she went through the things that she has to get to where she is today. And I think that's something that's really special. So for anybody who listens to this episode, you'll hear us talk about it towards the end, but I want to plug it right away, right at the beginning. Erica's practice is called Shore Point Aesthetics and Healing, and it's based in Rumson, New Jersey. So if anybody is a local Fix listener, would love for you guys to check her out. This won't be the first time that you'll be hearing about Erica and all of the great work that she's up to. So stay tuned. Make sure you're following both of us on Instagram. All of our handles are linked down in the show notes because we've got some fun stuff coming your way. But in the meantime, let's get to know Erica, and I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. So tell me what you do like to sip on in the morning.
I do something called NMN and NAD. It's a sublingual powder that I use every morning to get my brain and body jump started for the day. And I find that it kind of just takes the place of a hot beverage. Don't get me wrong. I do like hot beverages. I do have tea mid-morning.
There we go.
It's been a game changer. I don't know if people know about NMN or NAD, but it's something that's kind of a buzzword now in the longevity medicine space.
Well, we're definitely going to get into all of that because you're an expert on the topic. And I love the fact that you can speak to it from your own personal practice and experience too. I think that's really important, and something I try to focus on with all of my listeners and any client that I work with is them understanding like, hey, I'm giving you this advice or guidance or some kind of path forward that I can speak to from personal experience. And I know that's a huge part of your story. But before we get into all those details, just to kind of open it up to the listener, I would love to know, rather than listing off your resume, right? Like, I know all of your certifications and qualifications, and yes, those are important, but I want to take us to a little bit of a deeper level and get into a deeper conversation in terms of who is Erica, but more specifically, why should we care about what you have to say throughout this chat?
I feel most alive helping people. And so that's kind of where my journey has always been. I've always been in healthcare since high school on, and it just kind of steered me in always in helping people. And so without getting into all the degrees that I have, that's really the basis of what my life has been. And I think if you're a client of mine, you know that. You have the floor whenever you're in my space. And so I love that. That's what gives me life, really. So
that's beautiful. And let's go all the way back. You just said that you have wanted to be in a space of helping people and realizing that you wanted to be a part of healthcare since you were in high school. So what made you realize that nursing was of interest to you?
I love science. I love the human body is incredibly amazing. I mean, the things, we don't even know half the things about our human body. And the way it can regenerate and rebuild itself and the resiliency of it is just so inspiring to me. And everybody has their own stories as to how their bodies have helped them along the way. And just listening to those stories and maybe helping with little tidbits of advice or whatever we're doing in the office. I feel like it's just guiding people, which is amazing and has always been a part of my life, sciences especially.
And to speed us up to now, today, and probably the last several years that have gotten you to where you are, tell me a little bit about your practice and ShorePoint and what you're creating and what really inspired you to go down this path.
Probably about 15 years ago, the man that I was with was diagnosed with stage 4 colon and rectal cancer. And it was a long journey. He was in and out of remission for about 10 years. It ended up going eventually to his liver, lung, and then brain. And along that journey, we learned a lot. We learned a lot about cancer. We learned a lot about the human spirit. We learned a lot about how important the mind is, how important it is to say, I love you, which is like the simplest thing in the world. But especially now after COVID, like, you never know, you might not see people again.
Yeah.
And so how valuable is that time and that conversation? And so when he died May 4th it was the 3-year anniversary last week, actually. COVID hit and the hospitals were insane. And I think my parents knew that my mind was not in a happy place. And so this office space opened up where I grew up in Rumson. She was actually a friend of mine. And she said, you are going to be amazing here. People are going to love you. They need you here. And my parents, who are usually the naysayers, were like, you have to do it. So we went in and we gutted the space and we started out with COVID testing, which is crazy.
You got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah, because that's all anybody wanted.
Right. You're meeting the demand of the market, Erica.
Yeah. 2020, like what were we doing? COVID testing.
Right.
And then we started with IV infusions, which were so valuable to people for immunity and just all the things. And then it's just kind of grown. It's just so rewarding to meet people, to see people that I grew up with, which is a little crazy, and their kids. And so it's almost been like therapy for me to have a space and be able to help people in any way that I can.
There's so much to go into from that. But before we talk about, like the emotional versus the science and all that sort of thing, just in your experience of having your partner face this life-threatening and ultimately life-ending diagnosis as a medical professional, like kind of walking yourself back to like the day you both found that out. What was that like for you? And then kind of walk me through what it was like to have that nurse lens through his entire journey. Like, how did that feel in balancing being his partner, but also being in this space professionally?
Whenever you have such a diagnosis, I think the first thing you go to is shock. And then you go into a state of numbness. That's the best way I could describe it, because you're in survival mode and you're like, what do we do? Like, what are we doing? What are our options? Probably the worst part of my life so far, but also it was very empowering. It shifted the way I practice medicine. There is a huge and emotional and spiritual component that needs to come in. Huge, because that is where a lot of disease processes stem from. Mm-hmm. If you don't have your mind and spirit in line, then that's what disease processes start with. And that's why I still practice cardiology in the hospitals. Your heart and mind are directly related, 100%. And most people that we see in the hospital that have chest pain, it's really, a lot of it is an emotional component. I mean, of course, there's hereditary things and diet and lifestyle and all those things. But, if you ask somebody who has chest pain that comes in for a code MI, which is a myocardial infarction, it's like, well, what were you doing before your chest pain? And a lot of times it was, I was watching the news, or I was arguing with my spouse. I lost my job, or all those things. So there's a huge, to say that the mind and heart are not together and working in sync is just being numb, really.
Do you think that you would have been able to make that realization had you not been through the experience that you did with your partner?
Not to the degree that I do now. Definitely not. No. And because it was really a death sentence from day one with stage 4.
Yeah. I mean, it's the fact that he lived as long as he did is, I'm sure you weren't expecting that, right?
No. I mean, we, a lot of what I practice in my practice now are the things that we did for him with the IV therapy, and certain other things, definitely kept him alive for so long. The grateful part of that is we got to have the serious and hard conversations. Some people die and you're like, oh my God, I didn't even get to say goodbye. We got to say goodbye every day for like 7 years, and what a gift, I just, very grateful for that. So
I love, like, I have chills just in hearing you say that. I love your perspective on that, right? Because I think, for argument's sake, someone could turn around and say that could have made it that much more painful, right? Mm-hmm. Like watching the person that you care so much about and you're doing everything you can to help them, but there's only so much control that's actually in your own hands and the way you show up for them, the way you're caring for them on a day-to-day basis. So how have you been able to and continue to cultivate that kind of perspective? Like, I think that takes like really, a very strong but intent, like there's a lot of intent behind that mindset, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, so when he was diagnosed, you reevaluate your life. You just can't help but not. And so I went from a lifestyle of hardcore working out. I was a CrossFitter, 2 sessions a day, did a competition, always out on the go, partying, traveling, doing all the things. And then it's like you hit a roadblock and you're like, okay, this is not working. And so I started a mindfulness practice. It started with the Calm app, simple, easy.
Love my Calm app. Use it every night.
3 minutes. I mean, even if you're thinking of other things, you're like, okay, I did it.
Yeah, so true.
And now I have to say I meditate 3 times a day for about 45 minutes. I actually schedule the time in the morning, and mid-afternoon, I have an hour. I actually don't eat. One of my physicians were like, why don't you take a lunch break? I'm like, no, it's my mental
health. It's that important to you.
Yeah. So sometimes I don't even eat lunch, but, and then before I go to bed. So that was what brought us both through. Yeah, the mind is incredible. To be able to shut off, that was my saving grace for sure, while he was still on earth.
I mean, even just you talking through, like, let's just take the mindfulness practice and the growth that you've had with that, to go from the 3 minutes to now doing that 3 times a day for 45. That's amazing. And I think a lot of people would be really quick to hear a lot of what you were going through and be like, how could you possibly have shut your brain off? Right?
Yeah.
So talk me through that. Like, what were there's so many different techniques and there's so many different ways to meditate. So I'd love to hear what works for you specifically.
Yeah. You know what? It starts with breath. There's a breathing practice that, one of the yogi gurus that I follow, taught us a long time ago. And, part of meditation is going like out of your body.
Yeah. That's a really great way of saying it.
Yeah. I mean, some people have heard of transcendental meditation. It's kind of a form of that. You sometimes I have the feeling that I'm out of my body, but most of the time it's like a subconscious state. And it really just takes the commitment, number one, and practice. Number two, those are the best things. And not being hard on yourself. Like, I feel like in the beginning, I was like, oh my God, this is terrible. Like I suck at meditation. Not a mindful person at all. Like, the world is caving in and this just is, but something inside of me was like, this is your piece. Like, you have to do this for yourself, because everything else was for him. That was my only moment for me. Which I was grateful for. I mean, anything that I could do for him to keep him on earth, but yeah, I think the main thing with meditation is to not focus so much on, what you're not focusing on and really you sitting there and actually doing it, for the 3 minutes or 10 minutes and you just go up, from there. I didn't start all of a sudden at 45 minutes. I just, I got to 15 and 20 and I was like, I could really do this a long time. And sometimes it's 2 hours. Like at night, if I don't have anywhere to go, it's like, oh my gosh, okay, now it's time to go to bed.
Yes.
But it's awesome. I mean, there have been studies that show that just 20 minutes of meditation is like 4 hours of REM sleep.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it's so cool. So cool.
And you mentioned just that shift in your whole perspective and the way you were living your life in terms of that go, go, go mentality, the way you were exercising. What kind of physical changes have you now seen in really prioritizing the mind versus just like maybe a certain physique?
Yeah. You know what? I'm less concerned about how clothes fit and how maybe I don't even really look at what I look like, which is terrible. I guess. I don't know. I hope I look okay. I mean,
your hair looks amazing today. You have very beautiful hair.
But when you're in that like constant go, 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 and let's go out and party and work out so you have muscles, it's real, but again, it's not. Like when you're in that life and death constant environment, like, is this the day that we're going to get this horrible news? And like hospital, you know what I mean? And so it just shifted that whole mindset, that we in America do. I mean, we work hard, we work out hard, we party hard, we travel hard, all the things. And when you take that moment of like peace for yourself with nobody else, it kind of puts things in a different perspective. Not saying one is right or wrong. Hey, listen,
Sure.
I'm starting, my mid 40s. So
I think it's just become, I had a guest on my show recently and we were also talking about mental health, and we were talking, he was a fitness professional as well, and just talking about how a lot of his clients who ultimately see quote unquote better results in terms of them being sustainable and actually like living a full life are the ones who get okay with operating inside of the gray versus all the extremes that we tend to live at. Like those go big or go home moments. Like,
huge.
What's the heaviest weight I can put on the barbell? What is like the most amount of minutes I can spend in the gym? It's just living in these extremes was the way he said it. And I really liked that analogy.
That's huge. I love that. I'll take.
Yeah. And, I think too, what you said of just like it obviously having the news that someone you care so much about, you could lose them any day. Like it puts into perspective of like, and I'd love your take on this because obviously I'm making a lot of assumptions, like the time that you're spending in the gym, right? Like, did you ever get to a point where that just didn't necessarily feel as worth it to you? And how did you balance that with also prioritizing taking care of yourself? Because you said yourself, like meditation became the one thing that was just for you when so much of your energy was put into taking care of him.
Yeah, no. And it was like the gym was not a priority anymore. It was, okay, what's on the docket for today? Chemo, radiation, surgery, whatever it was. Or other opinions, because in the end he had to enter in studies because it was, really bad. Yeah, I mean, the the best times for myself while he was sick were I would go for long meditative walks. I found like the gym noise was just noise. And I really could not, after I don't even belong to a gym now. I just could not disconnect to be helpful to myself or him. And so, yeah. And I was still working in the hospitals at that time. So that noise was still there as well. So I think that following the peace and the quiet was my goal in whatever time that I had for myself.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And, you know, in talking about what your life looked like and trying to find those moments of silence and just like, rather than filling yourself with these distractions, but actually like acknowledging your emotions for what they were, I think it can be hard to do, right? Like I talk to a lot of my clients about that and making them understand just from like more of the scientific mechanism of stress, right? When you look at fitness, so many people, and when I say fitness, I mean specifically working out, so many people that I work with are like of the mindset of I have to do more, I need to do more cardio, everything I was just saying about the extremes. And a lot of them say that it's for their mental health. And I get that. Like I get it to a degree in the sense that you can go to the gym and you can maybe not think about your problems or however you want to phrase it. They're still going to be there when it's over. And you have to understand on like a fundamental scientific level that while working out is technically a good form of stress, it's still stress. And there's still that the body processes it the same way. That inflammatory response is still going to be there either way, even if you perceive it as something that's good. And I think that's been a mindset shift that's hard to get a lot of people out of.
Yes. Yeah. And huge points that all the above. I couldn't have put it better myself.
Thank you. So let's talk more about the science, right? Like let's talk about, you know, we didn't get into a ton of detail in your history and your interest in regenerative medicine. I'd love for you to share a little bit more about that because as I know from us previously speaking, that's influenced a lot of your decisions and how you're building your current practice. I want to talk more about IV therapies and just get into the benefits of a lot of those things. So wherever you want to start with all that.
Yeah. So before he was diagnosed, before we even met, I started working for a reconstructive and plastic surgeon who was doing the first nerve transplants in the country on the East Coast. Yeah, he was really cool.
That's really cool.
Really cool. You know, people that had been in car accidents with severed arms and legs, we were reconnecting their nerve tissue and they were using their arms and walking again. Like,
wow.
Incredible stuff. Men who had prostatectomies had full function of that part of their body, like just life-changing stuff. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna get my master's degree. Like I want to do this for a living, you know? And so I went and got my master's degree. That's when my boyfriend got sick. And so it kind of went on the back burner. I worked with a functional medicine doctor for a period of time because I knew that I was shifting more out of the Western medicine philosophy of here's a prescription, be on your way. Because that's what we do. Yeah. That's what it's about. And more ways to help people's bodies be more functional and not be sick. More of the Eastern medicine philosophy, which believes that if you're sick, they failed you, which I love. And so when he got sick, that's really what we were focusing on, IV therapy. There are many different things, mindfulness, marijuana. We're not going to get into, I doubt you want to get into that.
We could have a whole other podcast on that. I mean, I could have 10 podcasts with you, so it won't be your first time on the show. Nothing's off limits here.
Yeah.
By the way,
right now I don't write any prescriptions at all. It's mainly IV infusions, and meditations. We have a meditation at least once a week.
That's awesome.
Because I feel like for the community, it's so important, and it helps to give a different perspective when you're being guided than when you're on your own, for sure. And hearing other people's experiences with it is kind of cool too. Like at the end, some of our guides will say, you know, does anybody have anything to share? And
that's so cool.
Some people levitate. It's like, what room are you in? Yeah, it's just a cool part of medicine. And so it's just growing, and been very expansive, which has been really cool to just watch it grow, the whole practice. But in the process of him living and then his death, I really got involved in researching alternatives to antidepressants. And one of those alternatives was NAD.
Yeah, I'd love to talk more about this because as I've shared with you, and I've shared this on my show pretty openly, I am somebody who's taken antidepressants. And while I knew that it was the right thing for me at the time with what I was experiencing, I wish I had more information to have made a more informed decision to really figure out if that was the path forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, depression and anxiety is a really tough subject. I mean, especially during the month of May here,
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are, most of the people that I see now have mental health issues. Like I'm finding, like, it's not about the Botox, because we also do Botox and other things in the practice, but it's really about the mental health and why they're feeling that they need these certain things, which are Band-Aids. But so in the journey, in my research, I found that NAD just was like the missing puzzle piece. And so I was like, well, let me try it. I'm the best guinea pig for anybody, if I'm going to be practicing this way. So, it just like, was so expansive. It's like it's like putting lights on a dimmer, and then with the NAD, they're just like at the top most level that they could be of brightness in your mind.
That's a cool analogy.
Yeah, no, it's pretty game changing, actually.
And tell me more about the protocol with it. Like, how frequently is somebody taking it? Like, I know you mentioned that you have your powders in the morning. I think the other one you said was called NMM.
Yes. So NAD is part of the Krebs cycle, 8th grade biology. And it has a few precursors, NR and NMN. They're very tiny molecules. You really have to scrutinize labels on things. Also, you have to think about your gut and whether you're really absorbing what you're putting in it. If you have a leaky gut, if you're on Pepsid every day, if you've been on a lot of antibiotics, you're only really absorbing 30% of what you're putting in there.
Mm-hmm.
So, when we call that bioavailability in the medical term. So when I'm taking my own supplements and when I'm suggesting them to other people, it's almost never a tablet or a pill. It's always either a submucosal, which is under the tongue, or intranasal, or something that we inject or put an IV in for. So when my boyfriend died, it obviously wasn't a surprise that he was going to die. But when that actually happens, it was very destructive to me.
Of course, you lost him.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, in doing the research, I looked at some research studies that showed that NAD in an IV form resets the dopamine receptors, which is our get up and go hormone, as well as serotonin, which is our happy hormone. So I started out with a 9-day straight drip of NAD. And it was really life-changing. It was like the dark cloud. There was a gust of wind that just blew it away, and it never came back. And then after that, I started injecting myself twice a week with NAD intramuscularly. And now I use the powder. I use the powder maybe 3 days a week, and I inject myself maybe once a month, because with NAD in the Krebs cycle, as soon as it's replenished, you don't need, it's not
to
like
keep re-upping it. Right.
No.
But I think you had mentioned to me too, like a lot of it because of the way our bodies function and then the lifestyle decisions we're making. I think the first time we spoke about this, you referenced like alcohol consumption can impact these sorts of things too. So I would imagine that, yes, you can take these supplements, but at the same time, we need to also evaluate what else you're doing on a regular basis. Correct?
Absolutely. And other things that can deplete it are loud sounds. Like when you're at a concert,
wow.
Festivals, you're out in the sun, listening to loud music, drinking heavily. That's why you feel like you've been run over by a truck when you come home.
It's true. I'm laughing because I know the feeling.
Yes, we've all been there, done that. Or Vegas. I mean, Vegas, if any drip bar in Vegas is probably doing really well, especially because that's all you need to keep.
But it's interesting, like, right, like to then put this, you know, really like caveat this more, because when you, with the Vegas example, I think people think like, oh, I'm getting this drip because I drank alcohol, so I must be dehydrated and this is just going to take care of my hangover. But there's a whole lot more to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then and I don't want to put the antioxidant thing on the back burner. I mean, huge in IV drips. It goes directly into your circulatory system where your body needs it. It's not taking a mouthful of vitamin C and saying, okay, I'm good. And we realized that during COVID, I had a lot of physicians that I was dripping who were not vaccinated, who were in hospitals. They were doing, I have a special IV infusion for a viral load. And they were doing injections of NAD just twice a month, the viral drip and the NAD injection, and they, knock on wood, still have not caught COVID. And here we are, you know, beyond 2 years, and they're still really healthy. So there's something to be said for that, and the antioxidants and the anti-inflammatory effect that they have on the systemically on the body and our immune system.
Now, having experienced all of this and putting it into practice, not just with yourself, but with the people that you work with as well, what's your take on supplementation in terms of people buying, you know, vitamin D that's in capsule form as just one example, that sort of thing? Like, do you think it's a waste of money?
I
know this is a loaded question, so I was trying to be careful of how I worded it, but just from your experience, like, you know, because I talk to my clients about this often. One of the big things that I really look for when I'm recommending certain things to them, like liposomal supplements, I find are much more effective, especially just like on a personal level, you know, taking different things to help with sleep and that sort of thing. I tell a lot of my clients like, hey, let's look at the form that you're actually taking this. And yeah, the supplements industry is not regulated. So there's like a whole rabbit hole we can go down with this. But I guess like to, you know, keep it in your lane from your direct experience of what you're seeing and the results that you're seeing with the people you work with. What is kind of your take on that? Like, is it more about them coming and seeing you twice a month versus them, you know, popping X amount of vitamin D or magnesium or whatever it is on a daily basis?
Yeah. I think everybody has everybody's an individual. So I don't like to do like a broad term about that. So we have to look at what your issues are. But from what I've seen, I feel like the injections and the IV therapy has really kept people off of whatever they're swallowing. And it's not like you're stuck with this pile, because I used to do it between the amino acids, you know, the muscle builder, you know, all the things. I just do, there's a certain IV drip for muscle recovery. Bam. Done, you know? And so I'm a little jaded because it's been my life, past over a decade between him and now with my practice, for sure. Like, you know, I can't claim that anything cures anything, of course, but, you know, a drip is, it will cost you anywhere from maybe $200 to maybe $300 once or twice a month. How much do you spend on supplements and protein powders? Well, protein powder I think is really necessary, but that's a whole other conversation because I don't think we get enough protein at all. But anyway, that's a whole other conversation. So yeah, to answer your question.
Well, I am going to now I have to ask you that question next, because I think that other people are really quick to be like, oh, we don't, there's some controversy around the whole protein thing. And I am of the perspective that I work with mostly females, and most of them are not consuming enough protein, especially with the way that they're trying to exercise or the results that they want to see and the disconnect and why they're not necessarily getting there. Right. But then there's all this messaging that is in direct argument with what I just said and saying that, oh, we don't like, Not that we can make sweeping claims, again, about every single person, and this is individualized. That's why I work with people one-on-one. That's why you're looking at a holistic health picture of somebody and not just assessing, oh, this worked for my last 3 patients, so it should work for the next person. Right. But, you know, how does the consumer that isn't maybe as passionate about this as, say, you and I are, really try to decipher like what the best route is for them?
Yeah. I think it is seeking help from people like you and myself, for sure. I mean, obviously with protein, you want to make sure that kidney function is okay, liver function is okay. You know, those are 2 main things. I mean, let me tell you, I was on a protein powder when I was CrossFitting that actually I had a heavy metal poisoning from it.
Wow. I'm saying wow, but like I'm also partially not surprised.
Yeah.
You know,
have to do your research. You want to make products are, you know, backed. I mean, I talk to people in these companies. I'm like really on a kick with Symbiotica right now. Do you know that?
I think I just recently listened to the interview. He's done a couple, but I just recently listened to the interview he did on the Skinny Confidential. I love him. He could talk for 10 hours in my headphones and I'm just like soaking up everything he's saying. It's like one of the only podcasts I've ever listened to. And I've immediately wanted to go on the website and actually look at their products.
Yeah. And they actually have a great plant protein powder with the mushrooms in it, you know, lion's mane and all that good stuff. Essential amino acids, good fats. I mean, people run away from fats. Fat is so necessary especially when you're working out hard. You need fats, the avocado, the salmon, all the omega-3, you know, all this. But his, I actually bought 3 of his plant proteins. My gut is just happy when it has it, which is awesome.
That's amazing. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so, how long have you been using them?
I would say probably about a month, but from day one, and I have gut issues. Definitely have a leaky gut. From day one, I did it on an empty stomach. Like sometimes I feel either I get bloated or I feel like sluggish. Right. Okay. Let's work out. Let's do our day. Didn't skip a beat, which I really loved about it. So highly recommend. Plug to Symbiotica if you're out.
No, and it sounds like they're on the verge of creating a lot of cool new products. And I think, and really one of the just like takeaways I had from every time I've listened to one of his interviews, like he's really, like you said, like, yes, there are different supplements and all these sort of things that we can incorporate into our routine, but remembering that so much of it starts up here. And for those of you just listening to this, I'm pointing to my head and really focusing on your mind and how you're managing your stress and that sort of thing. Because again, just like we can make the argument that certain antidepressants and prescriptions are Band-Aids, you still have the responsibility to look at how you're leading your life.
Huge. Yes. 100%.
So I know you're in the process of expanding your practice because up until this point, you've been doing everything by appointment only, correct?
Yes.
So tell me about the growth, like on a personal level of this business. And hey, like we can tie that into the fact that it's amazing that more people are starting to talk about this and starting to recognize the importance of that, what falls into that functional medicine category.
Sure. Yeah. Well, we are still kind of by appointment only, but now we have a drip lounge next door.
Cool.
That's next week, which we're really excited about. I had an influx of RNs that probably just want to leave the hospitals who I'm hiring, which is fun. And we're going to do a lot of mobile drips because I think people do want that, especially during the summer, you know,
awesome.
Parties and stuff like that. And then those of us who are in New Jersey know beach clubs. So we're going to be in a couple beach clubs this summer just to get out there and help people have a great, healthy, you know, vivacious summer. Hopefully it's right now it's kind of a dreary
I know
day.
it's a little, we got a little tease of warmer weather and all of a sudden I've like needed to pull my winter coat back out again. I'm like, what's going on?
It will come.
It's coming. It's coming.
Yeah.
But that's so exciting. And I know this may be a hard claim to make, but if there was like for the summer, if you could only pick like one IV that everyone should consider getting, like what would you recommend?
I don't know if it would be an IV. It would be definitely an ad shot.
Okay.
That is my main, like if somebody only has like 40 minutes or whatever, I'm like, don't even bother. Let's give you a shot and you're on your way. It just is an immediate pick me up. We call them happy shots in our office. Sometimes if you come for a consult and you need something else like vitamin B12, or we have something called lipo-mic, which is something that helps the body to release stored fat and increases metabolism, then we'll add that to that. Or CoQ10, whatever. There are different additives that we can add. But that would be the quickest, easiest thing. That would be my number one go-to for sure.
I love it. The more we keep talking about it, I'm like, after this, I'm going to ask you when I can come over and set up my appointment. But that also made me realize too, I should have asked you this sooner in the conversation, but in talking about all these different recommendations that you have for your patients, I'd love for you to kind of walk the listener through, if somebody is coming to you for the first time, what are you looking at? Like, what kinds of questions are you asking them in that initial consult? Like, what does that experience look like the minute they walk into your practice?
Well, first I ask them why they're there. And most of the time, things that they're not happy about pop up. A lot of it is self work, I'll be honest, or relationship type stuff. A lot of people ask me if I'm a psychotherapist. I'm not.
There were different points throughout our conversation that I was like, I wonder how how any kind of like therapy has fit into this for you. So I could see how someone would ask that. Yeah.
A lot of the conversation has to do with childhood stuff. Because we have a lot of childhood trauma that we like block out. We do, unfortunately. And we do get into the spiritual aspect, but then we also get into lab work. I do bring my clinical hat in eventually. I have everybody who's had recent lab work come in with that. And then we determine if there needs to be repeat lab work. And then we go from there. Everybody's individual. I'm not like an IV lounge where you just pick from a menu and you kind of like see what you think you want. It's not really like that.
I think people don't I've definitely been to places like that. And while I've felt good afterwards, right? Like if I had to measure the efficacy of what I just did, I wouldn't know. And I'd probably know more than the average person, right? So I'm saying that and saying like, it's cool, like for the experience, I guess, but I would want to go there to be able to see a difference and really see those results.
Yeah. No, and my regulars who come in once or twice a month, they have their own cocktails. I don't know how they're going to feel about the drip lounge now. Well, they're just going to have their cocktail that people are going to know that that's theirs. But, and probably the other people that are sitting there are going to be like, well, why can't I get that?
And then you'll be like, hey, come on over.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I think it's also a safer way. I mean, if you have any kind of anxiety about putting stuff in your circulatory system.
Sure.
I feel like I got rid of that anxiety in it. I mean, a lot of people have had bad experiences with IVs. Let's face it. I mean, not every nurse is that great. So, being completely honest about it. So, we want to kind of get rid of that stigma. With IVs, it's, I don't know.
I mean, I think it's a matter of, right? Like everything comes down to what you can only go off of based on whatever experience you've already had. So It's like normalizing any of the conversation we've been having. Like, I think to tie it all back to Mental Health Awareness Month, right? The biggest challenge with it is for so long how uncomfortable people have been talking about a lot of these topics. So I'd love to know, with the work that you're doing and also the internal work you've done personally, how you feel that you as an individual, your practice, your team is contributing to kind of changing a lot of those stigmas.
Yeah. Well, and it is. And I think that's why, some people feel like, we kind of predetermine our paths in this lifetime. And I definitely believe, like, my boyfriend and I had planned, for him to have his experience and for me to experience that whole process and be a clinician in this life and be able to carry that in to my clients now. Yeah, it was definitely looking at now, I could say this 3 years after his death, that it was a blessing. That experience definitely has made me more compassionate, more understanding. I am not, I don't have a God complex. Some clinicians do. You feel like they're like, this on this pedestal. I definitely don't have that, because of the experiences that I had with him. And I'm eternally grateful, for sure. Yeah. It's set me on this path, and it's growing. It's expanding in other ways, which, we'll talk about another time. So yeah, just, really.
What do you think he would say if he were here with you today and witnessing what you're doing?
Good job. Yeah. To take something that was incredibly, I can't even say destructive, and make it and create this life in it. Yeah. And, we talked about it while he was alive. So I feel like he's still here because we had conversations about what I need to be doing and when he's gone. And that's my path. Everything goes back to him, which I'm grateful for. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think that's really special. I think, having had him there to have those conversations, right? It's like, even if he was never physically in your office, right? How could you not walk in there and not think about even the smallest thing that you're doing that reminds you of him, that is a way of honoring him? It's just, he couldn't not be there, right?
Yeah, no. And he's there every day. Like, even, I have some clients that have come in and do have cancer. And, actually it was last week, she came in, she's like, she said, when I was diagnosed, the only person I thought about was your boyfriend, and I never met him.
Wow.
But because he lives through you in your practice, it was comfort in knowing that, I'm not alone, that there are tools, there are people that I have in my life that will help me. And if I can just be that in somebody's life, it makes my whole world,
Yeah. Yeah. There's nothing more gratifying than a statement like that.
No, it's so cool. Yeah.
Well, Erica, I want to be respectful of your time. And I couldn't think of a better note to end it on. Like, seriously, everything you just said, and so beautiful, but more importantly, everything you've said throughout this conversation it's not just bringing real, actionable, useful information to people, but you have that humanly perspective on it. Like, you've lived this yourself too. And I really appreciate that. I think there's so much power in that, because it just allows a person to show up so much more authentically. Yeah. And I want to acknowledge you for your strength and moving forward in the way that you have, and now being able to give back and continue to give back, right? In a way that's like on a deeper level means that much more to you. So I really, really appreciate everything you've shared today.
Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity.
Of course. You're so welcome. Now, I finish my show on a lighter note. I usually like to finish with a quick little lightning round, and they're all fun questions. Like, they may be related to health and wellness, food, anything. So I'll ask you a couple quick ones, and then we are officially done. Okay. You ready?
Yes.
Okay. So we actually didn't talk anything about food, but I'd love to know, like, what is your I don't like to use the word cheat meals, but like, are you a sweet person, savory person? Like, what's your favorite, like, indulgent meal that you like to have?
Oh gosh. Well, if anybody's been in Florida, they have fried chicken at, this is so funny that we're talking about this, at one of their food chains, and it is incredible. So if you're ever in Florida, just go to their deli section and get their fried chicken, because that is definitely my go-to. And then what we do is we bring it home, we make waffles.
Nice. The chicken and waffles. I love it. I think I told you I spent some time in North Carolina. I can't remember. But yeah, and I also went to school in Virginia. So got a little bit of those Southern roots there, and I've had my share of chicken and waffles too. I
mean, it's the meal for the day that day.
It's yes. But But hey, you get some fats in there. I don't know that I would put the word healthy in front of it, right?
It just feels good.
Now, what is your, you mentioned earlier, like talking about opening your own practice in the area that where you grew up and what that's been like for you. So I'd love to know, like, what are your favorite go-to spots right around Rumson, Seabright, like anywhere locally that you like to go?
Oh, cool. Yeah. Well, my gosh, Barnacle Bill's is a favorite. I'm so happy they didn't go anywhere during COVID because What's Your Beef was a favorite and that's no longer.
Yeah, I actually don't even know that place.
Oh gosh. Yeah. That's where, Victory Tavern is now.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So Barnacle Bill's is definitely a go-to. Anybody who's, that's my main one. Of course, Donovan's is popular.
Yep.
That's been around forever. Thank God.
Time.
So much nicer now. The Windmill, obviously, if you're in for, dogs and cheese fries, 1:00 in the morning, you can tell.
I love it. I love all these references. They're great. Now, fitness wise, tell me, you mentioned that you used to be a big CrossFitter. Now you don't really belong to a gym. So what does your workout routine look like these days?
Yeah. So I have a bike. This is like my workout area. I have a bike and then I have a yoga mat next door and my meditation mat next door to that. So, that is my morning. I, make sure I'm up with the sun. My eyes, look at the sun while I'm doing all those things to boot up the circadian rhythm. And, I do it like 4 or 5 times a week. So
love that. Well, I have one more question and then we'll wrap up the show. If somebody's listening to this conversation, they get all the way to the end, you shared a ton of amazing information and insight, but they can only walk away with one thing, like one thing that you want them to remember as their takeaway. What would that be? You have all the strength and power you need to just make a difference and feel whole in yourself. You don't need anybody else or anything else. So tap into that power because it's so valuable. That's incredible. Well, again, Erica, thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure. I can't wait to hear from all the FYX listeners what they thought about this episode. And please, if anybody wants to contact you, potentially set up an appointment with you for a consult, learn more about your practice, where are all the places that they can reach you online? Yeah. Instagram is our biggest thing right now, surepoint.healing. And then my personal Instagram is healing.np. Those are the two best things, or just LoPresti@surepointhealing.com is my email. Those are the best ways to get. Perfect. Well, we'll tag all of that down in the show notes for easy access. Awesome. And for all of our listeners out there, wherever you're tuning in from, if you happen to be in the New Jersey area, I can't reiterate enough to please go check Erica out, learn more about everything she's doing. I'm definitely going to be getting an appointment on your books very soon. And I would love to share that experience on my social media too. So this isn't going to be the first and only time that you hear about SurePoint, and we're very excited for this. So from where everybody's listening from, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Thanks, awesome. Erica. Thanks so much, Krista.